So one thing about modern Star Wars and its fandom is that it absolutely refuses to allow extended universe fans to just enjoy the extended universe, and that's in part due to the overwhelming amount of shit that is in the expanded universe on top of the main storylines, the Galactic Civil War and the Clone Wars timelines. You also have the Dawn of the Jedi era, Knights of the Old Republic era, and some sub-eras between that. Then you got the rise of the Modern Republic era and Knights Errant. Then the Bane novels, a sizable New Republic era post Return of the Jedi, and the New Jedi Order that follows the Solo kids. Then there's the Legacy era, which is kind of two parts, with the Legacy era that follows Luke and the Skywalkers and Solos. Then there's the Darth Cade Skywalker era that takes place about 100 years later. It's just too much for modern Star Wars fans, and that's why I decided I would tackle the New Jedi Order series, since I think there's a lot of good stuff worth talking about from the pre-reboot EU. Chief among them being the New Jedi Order series, which is a series of 19 novels, 3 novellas, 2 comic limited series, and more, with the main series taking place across the 19 novels, and refreshingly seeing the Jedi and New Republic fight the Yuuzhan Vong rather than the Sith or whatever army they are helming at this point in the timeline. All this happened between October 1999 and November 2003, a relatively short time period. It all really started when Bantam Spectra lost the book rights to Star Wars, with it reverting to Del Rey, who put out the pre-EU Star Wars novels from 1976 to 1983, before hopping back on for the Phantom Menace novelization and moving forward from there. After that, the New Jedi Order series was their next goal. The plan was to add a little more cohesion to Star Wars' novel brand, since Bantam would publish most of their books as trilogies or singles, though stuff would come out at the same time, occasionally leading to minor continuity mistakes and leading to some confusion on when each series took place. The initial idea for the New Jedi Order was actually kind of cooked up at the Dark Horse offices, the main comic publisher of Star Wars, who hoped to make a story about aliens invading the Star Wars galaxy that shared some elements, such as Chewbacca's death, with the final novel series, though the alien designs and functions would have differed from the Yuuzhan Vong. It is said that Brian Daley, towards the time of his death, as well as James Luceno before he entered the universe of Star Wars officially, also pitched ideas for a similar concept at one point. One of the Vong's lead villains, Nom Amor, actually originated in the Crimson Empire 2 comic series as an advanced agent of a future invasion force set to establish the threat for the pitched Dark Horse series, though later adopted for the books rather than the comics. Anyhow, fast forward a tiny bit, and at a meeting at Skywalker Ranch, James Luceno, Michael Stackpole, and other authors in the comics and novel world are discussing ideas for the New Jedi Order and its threat, which led to the Invasion comic line being pitched as the book series, which seemed like a great idea by the staffers at the time. One thing the team wanted to work out was death in the series, since the Bantam days, heroes were seen as invincible. You couldn't kill the Falcon crew, since that was the bread and butter. The team's plan was to kill Luke Skywalker and recontextualize the game of Star Wars. George Lucas gave that idea a hard hell no, and also said they couldn't kill R2 or C-3PO, but otherwise the authors could go nuts and do whatever they wanted. They ultimately changed their sights on Chewie, since they figured that could be a pretty dramatic core to the New Jedi Order series and a good launching pad into the wider Yuuzhan Vong storyline. George ended up liking this idea, since it would impact the characters and prove no one was invincible in Star Wars, while also maintaining the marketability of the big three in marketable characters at the time: Luke Skywalker, C-3PO, and R2. Lucas wasn't going to let anyone kill off the money printers, so to speak. As for the stars, the series wanted to expand the cast a bit, adding in some new faces, but also pulling in Anakin, Jason, and Jaina Solo, who were starring in junior novels, now grown up a bit, and fighting alongside the older generation of Luke, Leia, Han, and Mara Jade, with the kids largely pulling the plot along as the books developed, as a passing of the torch of sorts. The planned conclusion was that a Sith temptress would start a love affair with Anakin Solo, so he would fight his older siblings as a Sith Lord, But George didn't like that idea, since that was the exact story of the main saga, but with the twins fighting together and the Emperor being a woman. So he requested that whole idea be scrapped and they move as far away from the movies as possible, especially since the prequels were being developed over in the film wing of Lucasfilm at the time, and it was just paralleling too close to that and would make it all redundant. The team from there pretty thoroughly outlined the events of the series as it would come, with the Vong being non-Sith alien creatures from outside the galaxy, most Sith elements being totally stripped, along with much of the retreading Imperial elements by George's request. The outline featured 22 novels, though this would be trimmed to 19 after the planned Nightfall trilogy was cut from the series. James Luceno, who was new to Star Wars at the time, but we've talked about many times on this channel, came up with the series Bible for New Jedi Order, but the team agreed that even though they had beats and ideas, if things changed as the story progressed naturally, then they would readjust slightly. Think like the MCU or something, with their larger story leading to Thanos and certain beats needing to be covered as a result, but largely relying on everyone to be creative and make it happen from there. The Yuuzhan Vong were developed to be religious zealots that wanted to exterminate the galaxy on some Sharia law shit, but the Star Wars version. Elements like a firm hatred of technology and use of biotechnology, along with the ability to be undetectable within the Force, a la the Islamari from the Thrawn trilogy, were also added to make these villains unique and foreboding. The name, the Yuuzhan Vong, was unironically derived from a tea on a menu at a French Thai restaurant, which was in the Yunnan region. So they basically just grabbed that and changed a few letters from Yunnan to Yuuzhan. Anyhow, this initial book, Vector Prime, was written by R.A. Salvador, who worked in the early meetings, but was largely just brought on to shepherd us into this new series. He is pretty busy working on a ton of novels of his own, including his own series, The Legend of Dritz, which has 39 novels so far. His impact isn't nothing, though. On top of this novel, he would later be commissioned to adapt Attack of the Clones into novelization. On top of that, the marketing for this book had a pretty large push behind it, but the coolest thing they did was make a commercial spot that was voiced by Mark Hamill himself, dramatically playing up this New Jedi Order series, and I'll be honest, it's kind of neat if nothing else.
With my loved ones and my loyal allies, I face a new challenge unlike any before, and I'm not sure if this time we can win.
Star Wars Vector Prime by R.A. Salvatore, the first novel of the New Jedi Order.
New Jedi Order Vector Prime takes place in 25 ABY and opens on Leia, her daughter Jaina, and Mara Jade on a peace mission to Romamul to meet Nomanor, with the planets of Romanul and Osirian about to go to war. The Osirians don't want Leia and the New Republic to support the people of Romamul, so they try to shoot them down. Though as Mara's ship, the Jade Saber, dodges these attacks, where Skitter starts shooting them down, causing some huge tension between the New Republic and Osseria. All this while we learn that Mara is struggling with a chronic disease that has killed everyone it infects, with her thus far being the only exception, though even the powerful Jedi is getting worn down by it. Meanwhile, Yeoman Carr of the Yuuzhan Vong starts an invasion on Excal 4 as a point to start growing his organic weaponry, nearest to the Republic to start their full galactic invasion. In a third story, Luke and his nephew Jason Solo are trying to appease the New Republic Security Council, led by Phalia from the Heir to the Empire series, who says Jedi are overstepping their authority in the New Republic. Luke, however, hopes to eventually sway them to support his vision for a new Jedi Council, similar to the one from the pre-Empire days, so he isn't the be-all, end-all leader of the Jedi going forward. Leia, Mara, and Jaina meet Nomanor and realize a treaty is likely out of the cards since he's kind of a crazy Darth Vader type. Soon after, the invasion of Excal 4 by the Vong begins, with them quickly overwhelming the planet, using their world ship, an organic and ginormous war vessel, which causes them to start operations on the planet. Meanwhile, the whole crew of the Falcon meet back up with each other and decide to head off to Reese to try to meet Lando and figure out more about the Vong that have started popping up and being all hostile. On Reese, they learn from contacts that Lando started using a new mining racket, trying to basically get easy platinum on the planet. planet. They also learn one of Luke's Jedi, Kip Duron, is doing some shady stuff, playing cop with his fighter squadron, the Dozen and Two Avengers. While Danny Kui, a scientist, and some of her colleagues investigate what's going on Heska 4, eventually being confronted by Yeoman Carr, who kills Danny's party aside from her and takes her prisoner. The Falcon crew meets with Lando on Dubrillion, and he has created a game out of testing modified TIE advanced fighters that have shields, allowing them to be virtually invulnerable to crash damage, something important when mining platinum off of meteorites, which is Lando's ultimate goal. Which is an invention that Leia's interested as a tool for the New Republic as well. The Solo kids try running the game, which involves hitting dangerous meteor belts at high speed, and while Anakin and Jason prove good pilots, Jaina turns out to be an ace, getting the highest score on the board, and starting her gradual rise to becoming a Rogue Squadron member down the line. Meanwhile, Kip and his team of fighters, the Dozen and Two, are patrolling when they run into a group of Yuuzhan Vong fighters, who, as it turns out, do not fly like standard pilots, with their organic weaponry also being a challenge to fully comprehend. With much of their squad destroyed during the dogfight, the only other Jedi in his team, Miko Reglia, was captured by the Yuuzhan Vong, who brought him to the same prison Danny Kui is in, with Miko eventually being fed to a giant creature after days of torturing. Lando wants some materials on Cern Padal, which leads Han, Chewie, and Anakin going there, only to find out the moon is falling on the planet. Han, Chewie, and Anakin go in to try to help evacuate despite panic and a sense that some citizens refuse to leave, thinking the whole thing may be the gods. Eventually, they find out a device or something is pulling the moon closer, so they need to try to neutralize it, but by the time they do, it's clear Doom is too near to Cern Padal for anything to really be done. The trio get out who they can, but upon their own escape, Anakin jumps off the ship to save a child and gets stuck in the winds caused by the destruction of the planet. Chewie goes after him, and while he saved Anakin and the child, Chewie was swept away by extreme weather, being killed in the process, with Han angered at his son, blaming him for Chewie's passing. While this transpired, Luke and Mara head to Belkadan, where Kip and his squad encountered the Yuuzhan Vong fighters. There they find a gas planet, all but abandoned. They explore a base only to find Yeoman Carr, who fights Mara, while Luke is elsewhere on the base, though Carr nearly gets the best of Mara with his new tricks totally foreign to her. She manages to kill him during their scuffle. While on the planet, though, Mara's disease also seems to be getting far worse than before, with her needing to leave, proving it may somehow tie to the Vong. The Falcon, on its way out of Cern Padal, run into Kip, who's leading an escape convoy from Cern Padal that is attacked by Vong agents, while Anakin, Han, and Kip fight off the invasion. Eventually, all the characters end up back on Lando's base at Dubrillion, knowing they would have to make a stand against the invasion force on the planet, with the Solo siblings taking to the sky as Luke and Lando figure out the Coral Skipper ships the Vong fly are alive. Luke wants to head back to Heska 4, thinking he can stop the ships there, hoping to break through the ice to see what he can mess up, though he needs a mining ship, which Jason and Jaina steal to head to Heska 4, knowing Luke couldn't be risked and was needed planetside on Dubrillion. The twins make it there, Jason going undercover, as Kip meets Jaina in the air. Jason saves Danny, who he grows a bit of a crush on, though this isn't super important here. The two fight some Vong, but amazingly survive and escape the planet, with the Battle of Heska 4 and Dubrillion going in their favor. The team meets back up and mourns Chewie and fears what the Vong could have done with a bigger force, knowing that it's just the beginning of whatever's brewing in the galaxy against the Yuuzhan Vong, and it's only going to get worse without Republic support. These stories kind of have a shit ton going on. This one probably has the most moving parts for now, but you kind of got to summarize a lot for you to even somewhat understand the story, though I'm sure that was all wildly confusing. Anyhow, Luke has a lot to worry about in this book, on top of Mara's illness. We'll touch on more in a second. He also has Kip Duron and his dozen starfighters causing galactic incidents, and is trying to head in all these Jedi as this new Vong threat hits the galaxy. Luke is directly training his nephews, while Mara trains Jaina, all of whom are important to the wider Vong threat as the books go on. Luke hopes to start a new Jedi Council to get more approval for Jedi activities in the political realm, though unlike the Clone Wars era, and probably in part because of the events of that era, the Republic is reluctant to really co-sign the Jedi, Add to that people like Kip Duron running amok throughout the galaxy. Making matters worse for the Jedi on this front is that Boris Kafalia took over as Chancellor of the New Republic following the death of Mon Mothma, something that for some reason doesn't actually appear on the written page, but happened shortly before this book due to a health condition brought on by nanomachines. Anyhow, he's very conniving, as we saw back in his introduction to the Thrawn trilogy, and he doesn't fuck with the lack of control the New Republic has over the Jedi. Mara got a mysterious illness and is headstrong, not wanting Luke to worry about her, though, of course, her husband is still trying to comfort and coddle her. Mara longs to have children, but given her age and condition, as well as Luke's need to run the Jedi, which is a ragtag mess at this point, she doesn't see that happening in the near future. One thing I like about Mara is just how well she fits in with the Falcon crew, though admittedly in these books you don't see the Falcon crew together nearly as much as I would like. Chewbacca is kind of the crux of this novel. Towards the end of the novel, during the invasion on Cernpadal while trying to save some refugees on the doomed planet, Anakin and Chewie are nearly killed and can't make it back to the Falcon, with Chewie sacrificing himself for Anakin, costing Han his best friend and the kids their furry uncle. One thing I will say following this novel is that it's really strange to lack Chewbacca as a character for Han, and Han grappling with this becomes a big thing later on in this series, with the plotline continuing throughout, but coming to a head in the Han Solo-led Agents of Chaos duology that's a sub-series of the New Jedi Order. Chewbacca's death was sad, but definitely allowed some interesting character stuff to come out of Han, and I think refreshes the character of Han and brings him into some of his best storylines in his history for both the EU and canon. I do think Chewie has some fun moments in this book too, though, like Han and Chewie's asteroid run on Dubrillion, where Lando's made a sport out of stress testing some of the ties he's modded. It's really fun to kind of see them interact in this book, and it's kind of a sad moment when Chewie finally dies. Han starts this novel feeling he and his family and close group of friends are invincible. This is an illusion, obviously, as we see Chewbacca die on the mission to Cernpadal. One thing I found really interesting is that despite their mounting odds from the start, Han can't really fathom how Chewie died, especially since surviving the impossible was kind of their thing. This really weighs on Han, who starts to kind of blame his son Anakin for botching the mission, and this leads to Han having a decaying sense of self-worth and being, for a little while in this series, a little bit out of the picture. Though much of the grappling on Chewie's death happens in the books to come, the seeds are still planted here though. Leia is kind of forced into the role of ambassador, though technically she left her main seats in politics. She still has great influence, basically being one of the founding fathers of the New Republic. Leia still has her Noghri bodyguards she got in the Thrawn trilogy, though they appear in the margins when needed and are rarely all that relevant to the larger plot. Lando has started several new ventures on Dubrillion, where he runs kind of a sports derby asteroid run track thing. He also hopes to mine some platinum from a hard-to-reach asteroid in the Hoth system, with these modified ties he's cooking up. Lando, of course, has his plans go up in smoke pretty quickly as the Yuuzhan Vong start coming around, eventually invading his homestead, Dubrillion itself. Anakin is the youngest of the three Solo kids and is there with his father and Chewbacca at the time of Chewie's death, him blaming himself and his father more or less reaffirming that he is to blame, though obviously that is an unfair expectation to put on him. As a Jedi, he clashes a bit with his older brother Jason, a recurring theme in the series, as Jason and he sees different routes to use the Force, which evolves a bit as they deal with the growing threat of the Yuuzhan Vong, but this is a pretty consistent element throughout the novels. Jason believing in more of a pacifist technique, though this life quest came at kind of an awkward time, with the Yuuzhan Vong War coming soon after, and Anakin seeing some Force needed to protect the galaxy. He's a Force prodigy and shows a lot of promise in that field, even when compared to his siblings. Jaina excels in the realm of flying, as we see when she runs Lando's course on Dubrillion. This would eventually lead to her time joining Rogue Squadron. The squad led previously by Wedge Antilles, but is now led by Gavin Darklighter, Biggs from the original Star Wars' younger cousin. Jason doesn't do much here, but is having a bit of a crisis of faith with the Jedi, hoping to study the Force in more of a passive and slow way, and not being the warrior Anakin is. He does infiltrate the Vong stronghold and saves Danny Kui, who was a former astrophysicist who met Miko Reglia at the time of his death. Kip Diron was a rogue element in the New Jedi Order, joining the dark side for a time before coming back, and working with Miko Reglia, starting a pirate-busting ship gang known as the Dozen and Two Avengers, then later just known as Kip's Dozen. Miko ends up being the first Jedi casualty of the war, which angers Kip and drives him further away from the primary Jedi Order as the novels go on. Yeoman Carr is the first Vong villain and one that underestimates the Jedi and died by the hands of a gravely ill Mara Jade, but also proving shockingly formidable to her and proving the Vong would be a tough enemy to beat. No Manor is sort of the Vong's Vader equivalent, with the fierce semi-leader who runs ground operations early on, and also proves to be violent and cunning, implanting Mara with her ailment as a way of weakening her. This would also be a test run to see if they could infect and wipe out the other Jedi this way as well. This novel, along with much of this series, is very dark and depressing, and I love it personally, but a lot of people and characters are killed, and novel to novel, things only become more and more hopeless. It all stems from here, and I think the novel sets up an interesting new threat that is far removed from the Empire, and that's interesting to me. Don't get me wrong, I love the classic feeling of Star Wars, but I also appreciate that George forced the creative team on this series to come up with something fresh and new. Chewie's death wasn't in here for shock value and was a very deliberate play to take the characters, namely Han Solo, into new directions and had stakes from the get-go that the Vong War would be a very dangerous and bloody battle. The book has well-written action scenes and describes the Vong well enough that you start to get what they're about, while leaving tons of room for expansion as the series went on and the lore for the Yuuzhan Vong continued to evolve. Overall, Vector Prime, though an introduction, is a very good one, and I think it's worth checking out to see if the new Jedi Order novels and the Vong War is something that interests you as a Star Wars fan. I thought it was really solid. Anyhow, following this book would come Michael Stackpole's New Jedi Order Dark Tide duology, which would dive us deeper into the Vong War and the lore of the Yuuzhan Vong threat.